it all I could, right? Right. But anyway, the drink for this movie is an old school, homemade, old-fashioned Lynchburg lemonade. Now, how do we make these? You're going to need about 1.5 ounces of Tennessee whiskey, Jack Daniel's preferred, 1 ounce of triple sec that you probably still should have inside your cabinet from way back in episode 1, about 1 ounce of lime juice, and 4 ounces of some lemon lime soda. Now, you can use Sprite or 7-Up or Slice or whatever you choose. And then on top of it, you want to kind of cut in some lemon slices. Now, when you make a Lynchburg lemonade, you're going to have to channel in your old, inner mixologist, okay? Because you want to make sure that the ingredients are properly balanced out. Otherwise, it can throw off the flavor of the drink. Mainly because what the whiskey does, it balances out the tartness of the lemon juice and the sweetness of the lemon lime soda. And once you taste it, if you make it the right way, once you taste it, you'll realize why this has been an old school classic. Now, why lemonade? Well, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of children and families as subject matter in this horror movie. And what do all families like to drink? They like to drink lemonade. And as far as the Lynchburg goes, well, when you watch the movie, you'll see. A young woman is followed by an unknown supernatural force after a sexual encounter. Okay, like that can be interpreted a whole bunch of different ways, right? I mean, maybe she got some guy coochie whipped, after a night at the club. Maybe she got a woman coochie whipped after a night at the club. I mean, who knows? I mean, but to be chased by something supernatural after a sexual encounter, oh, man, if we only knew, right? If we only knew. Be that as it may, it stars Maika Monroe, Keir Gilchrist, and Daniel Zavato. So as always, let's, get into our actors and the roles that they played. Maika Monroe has a modest 30 credits to her name, and she plays Jay Height. She is the protagonist, or the main focus of the movie. And what's interesting when you investigate some of these actors and actresses and their careers is looking at some of their, other things that they're into. Like, I did not know that she's a professional skateboarder, which is, pretty cool if you ask me. Some of her career highlights include Independence Day, Resurgence, where she played Patricia Whitmore. She was also in an interesting movie called Hot Summer Nights, where she played a young woman named Michaela. It's about these teenagers selling drugs up in Cape Cod in the early 90s. Good flick. And she also played Sandra opposite Shia LaBeouf in the film called Honey Boy. Keir Gilchrist is the most experienced actor in this movie, and he's got about 52 credits to his name. He's done a lot of TV, a lot of shorts. He's been on Queer as Folk. He appeared to have his breakthrough in a movie called It's a Funny Kind of Story, where he plays a teenager who checks into an adult psych ward. He was also in this movie called The Good Neighbor, opposite James Caan. Look, a review for that one is coming out soon, so get ready for that one. But that's a good one. And then he was in a movie called Heartthrob as a character named Henry Sinclair. So again, I don't really have much on Keir because a lot of his stuff, like I said, is TVs and shorts, and he's also a Canadian actor. Now, Daniel Zavato plays Greg Hannigan, another international actor. I saw him in a great independent film called Don't Breathe. Man, that was good. If you haven't seen Don't Breathe and you see it come up on your screens, by all means, please check it out. That is definitely a good movie. He was in Lady Bird. He was also in Vandal. He played a role. He was also been featured in Penny Dreadful, as Diego Vega. So, he's, again, modest. I mean, all three of these actors are relatively young, so they don't really have a lot of stuff behind their name. But Keir is the one that has the most chops, from what I saw inside of this movie. Now, as far as the arcs that they played, which was Annie, Paul, and Greg, there really wasn't much to them. They're all like relatively young and college age. And so, it's kind of hard to say if they go through any kind of major changes, because the characters they have are so young and they really haven't had anything traumatic happen to them. But when it comes to this thing that's following them, the fear is very palpable, very, very believable. The only character I thought that really had a little bit of depth to him was Paul. And that's because of the way he has this, general affinity for Anna. I mean, there seems to be some kind of history between the two of them. And it really kind of helped create this connection between those two characters. The remaining ones, I hate to be, mean about this, but they could have been cardboard cutouts. I mean, they were there for support. Greg's character tries to help out, but other than that, and there's one other guy in there who initially kind of passes the demon on to Anna. He's got a brief role and provides some exposition, but there really wasn't much to these arcs. These characters are who they are in the beginning of the movie and who they are at the end of the movie. I mean, well, you could argue that Annie kind of changes a little bit because there's like an innocence about her in the beginning of the movie where she seems to be generally happy with her life, but towards the end, it's almost like, this thing has kind of changed her outlook, realizing that whatever it is that's out there, it's out there. So I guess you could say there was a little bit of change with her. As far as dialogue goes, there really wasn't a lot of it here. Most of these discussions were focused on trying to discover what exactly is going on. Like, what is this thing that keeps following him around? There are a few moments of some light conversation between the characters, but I would be surprised if this script went longer than 90 pages. Most of what happens in this film is very, very visual, which is a good thing. This type of horror film, when you guys watch it, you'll see it doesn't really require much explanation or conversation. Things just kind of go. Now, at the core, the main conflict in this movie, I believe, is pretty much the human versus supernatural. Only God knows what this thing is and why it exists. I sat there and tried to, I don't know, I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, is this an allegory for something? Does it represent something that I can't see? Is it like a symbol? I mean, for all I know, maybe the demon is a representation of guilt, like what would it look like if all the decisions we ever made in our life haunted us and followed us around? Would it be like this, entity that is following her around? I mean, maybe, when she got involved with this guy, it's her bad decisions haunting her. I mean, I don't know. How would you exorcise that demon? How would you get rid of it? I mean, no one really knows. It just kind of follows you. The plot type, I thought, is for the most part a why done it. Like, why is this thing following you? Like, and more importantly, why does it follow you like it does? There's a style to the entity, however you want to describe it, that might turn some people off. Okay. Others of you will be sitting there on one ass cheek whenever it appears. It all depends upon how you scare. You could also kind of, classify this as, I won't say a dude with a problem, but a lady with a problem. And Annie is the one who has that problem. Apparently, whatever this thing is, it will not stop. And then on top of it all, the other problem is the moral dilemma. If you got something after having sex with somebody, do you pass it along? Or do you just stop having sex? I mean, like, what's your responsibility? Like, what would you do? Like, if you caught something and then it was transmittable, like, do you just oh, well, I guess that's it because I don't want to infect anybody else? Or do you just kind of do it and not say anything? Ooh, man, it's uncomfortable, And obviously, I mean, and if you're a girl, it's probably, not girl, if you're a woman, it's probably a little bit easier for you to pass it along. I mean, that's just the nature of the game. But if you're if you're a guy who's in a slump, you might be out of luck. This thing just might get you. Okay, it's a little bit more difficult for guys to kind of I digress. Thematically, I thought the theme revolved around, to me, I thought innocence. Okay, when I looked at it, it looked to me as though this young girl's innocence was stolen from her. Like, when she gets involved with that guy in the beginning of the movie, like, who knew that this was going to be the result of it? So it's kind of like she kind of went into it with a little bit of naivete, and then all of a sudden, boom, now this thing is chasing her. And I also saw thematically there was a friendship I thought that was in this movie, because you really see the loyalty that Paul has for Anna, and it gives you hope that he's going to be there for her no matter what happens, which is basically what somebody needs when a demon is chasing them around. Now, the structure of the film also kind of, it's balanced, but it's kind of imbalanced, right? Because you're not quite sure where things are happening in the movie. Like in the beginning of it, you kind of see Annie living her life as a typical 20-something, and she, is enjoying things as they should be normally. And then as you go into the second act, that's when the thing is introduced, okay? And then it begins following her. And then towards the middle, towards the end of the movie, they're trying to figure out ways to get rid of it. And then, of course, in the final act is when you have your confrontation and your climax and resolution. But, the way it ended for me going into that third act, it to me, there were some, there were things that were unresolved, at least from my viewing standpoint. I don't know how you might feel about it, but for me, it just kind of left me a little bit unresolved. The director in this movie, David Roberts Mitchell, hasn't had a lot of credits to his name. A lot of his stuff is shorts and other kind of, other small films. And so he really doesn't have a lot of credits to his name as all. So with this one, he kind of hit the jackpot. The visuals, I thought, of The Spirit were done really, really well. And the way it was shot, sometimes from the point of view of the afflicted versus regular people. And you'll see what I'm saying when you watch the movie. It's like, when somebody can see the demon and other people can't, it's interesting the way he shot that and edited it on film. Okay. There's not a lot of music in this, but there is a generalized sense of terror that is created, which I thought was really, really cool. Didn't use any tricky cameras. It was just kind of shot with this kind of like unsettling way, so that when you go into each scene, you find yourself paying attention to details and extras that you normally would ignore, especially like in the, like normally when you see a scene open up, your focus kind of goes towards the main characters on the screen. But because of the way he shot this movie, you really got to kind of pay attention to everything. So it creates this tension that is of the unknown. The editing and the details and the depraved manifestations of who this demon is create some of the weirdest iterations of a spirit that I've ever seen. And when you see it, you'll know what I mean. Now, what really worked in this movie was not knowing what or why this thing actually exists. And more importantly, its relentless nature. To me, what I think might not work for most people is the way the spirit moves. To some, it may appear that it's like non-threatening. Me personally, I thought that's what made the movie scary. Like, you don't really know. It didn't really matter how the thing moved. All you knew was that it was just coming for you. And that slow burn, that slow tension, man, it's tough to deal with. Now, it's rated R because there are some sex scenes in it. So if you're watching this with the kids in the room, I don't know how you want to handle, covering their eyes or whatever. They're short and they're not too bad. It's not like softcore porn. So, they can watch it. It's relatively quick. And there's a little bit of gore, but not much. Now, as far as the likely impossibility of a demon being passed on sexually, it's done so well that you actually believe it and the dread that it brings. To me, the only really unconvincing possibility was that there were a few scenes where the spirit kind of manifests itself physically. And that was kind of hard to explain. I couldn't figure that out personally, and it kind of left me with more questions about the nature of the spirit that I actually began the film with. But, regardless, you'll be able to suspend your disbelief and enjoy yourself. IMDb also gave it a solid 6.8. But Rotten Tomatoes, man, gave it a scintillating 95%. Man, critics loved this movie. You will definitely enjoy yourself. Audience score, I thought, was relatively low, 66%. And again, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact of the way the demon moved, or the spirit, or whatever the heck it is, the way it carried itself. I think some people may have thought, it's not that much. It's not that scary to me that much. Others were, like I said, like generally like, oh my God, here we go again. So it's kind of like, I think you got a mixed bag on that. It Follows comes in with a decent running time of about 1 hour and 41 minutes. So you could watch this and Sinister in about 3.5 hours. Not bad, right? Not bad for a double feature. To me, It Follows introduced a new type of monster / spirit / demon. Because not everything needs to have, or horns or red eyes or claws or anything weird coming out of its mouth. This is a new type of, a new type of monster. And while the story itself is a little thin, It leans a lot more on suspense and this tension of the story, making It Follows a kind of horror film that will have you looking over your shoulder when you sleep with the wrong person. For the movie It Follows, I decided to go with the tequila-based Envy cocktail. Now, why the Envy cocktail?